Welcome to Road Trip Roundup. This episode is Stories of Kevin in a Big Rig. This is a 9-part series that will be covered in multiple videos. Make sure to check the channel for a playlist that includes the entire series, and please like and subscribe so we can continue to make more videos every day. Without further ado, Part 6 of Kevin in a Big Rig, written by Strong Bad Jr., called Kevin in a Big Rig Part 6, Breakdown. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Kevin in a Big Rig. The popularity of this series has grown by leaps and bounds over the last week and a half, and all I can say is, wow! I can scarcely believe the amount of support and encouragement I've received from all of you, and I can't begin to tell you what it means to me. The only downside I've encountered is that I have to take extra care so that these stories don't completely suck. And with that, let's get on with Kevin in a Big Rig Part 6, Breakdown. Backstory: this story takes place about a week after the events of Part 5. First, Kevin and I made our delivery in Salt Lake City without incident and took another load north to Seattle, Washington. We had picked up another load that was bound for the East Coast when yet another disaster struck. I had made the initial pickup in Renton, Washington, and headed east on Interstate 90. Since I had driven half the night before the pickup and into mid-morning, my drive time for the day expired around Tanner, Washington, and first Kevin and I switched out. Ahead of us lay barren and mountainous terrain and nearly 3,000 miles of highway across the northern states of the lower 48. Combine that with the ever-threatening winter storms, first Kevin's horrible driving skills, and a dwindling supply of tolerance on my part, I was beginning to wonder if first Kevin would kill us both before I could get rid of him. At the end of my drive shifts each day, I had been religiously copying the information from the notes I had taken into an email on my phone. I addressed it to my fleet manager and the company safety director. Using my most professional and courteous language, I outlined everything I had witnessed over the past 2.5 months. I had reached the point where I didn't want revenge or compensation or even demand he be fired. I just wanted to get away from him. But, in order to do that, I needed a valid reason so management would be convinced. One reason? How about 100? First, Kevin took over and proceeded east along Interstate 90 toward Idaho. As was my habit by this point, I rode shotgun upon first leaving out at first. I'm still in the jump seat when we reach Snoqualmie Pass. In my opinion, there are 3 critical skills that all drivers must learn if they want to last long enough in the industry to make any real money: navigation, backing up with a trailer, and going down a long, steep mountain grade fully loaded. Going up a mountain might be slow and arduous. Going down can quickly turn deadly. If a driver doesn't control the speed during the descent, he will find himself behind the wheel of a runaway death machine. To make the situation more difficult, the brakes of the truck can overheat and completely fail if overused, making the loss of control inevitable. If you've ever driven through mountains and seen runaway truck ramps, that's exactly what they are for: a pre-selected crash scene. Most trucks now have a feature called engine brakes, more commonly known to truck drivers as Jake brakes. Unlike the typical wheel brakes, engine brakes cause the truck to slow down by restricting airflow in the engine. This causes the engine to add resistance to the drivetrain and serve as a sort of drogue chute. Also, unlike wheel brakes, engine brakes will not overheat or fail from overuse. When used properly, they can make going down a mountain grade far more efficient and safe. The use of engine brakes also happens to be one of the issues first Kevin and I disagreed upon. While I had been properly instructed by my trainer on how to use the engine brakes effectively, first Kevin was adamantly opposed to them. He wasn't shy about voicing his disapproval of my using them, but there was very little he could do about it. His opinion wasn't due to some rational reason, it was simply because the company safety department said so. During post-training orientation, the course presenters often had made a major issue about how engine brakes weren't that useful and that they wished they didn't come with the trucks. I later learned that these presenters were drivers who mostly quit within 2 months. I learned from my trainer, a third-year trucking veteran, that engine brakes were a lifesaver. First Kevin, being the sycophant he was, believed that anything the company higher-ups said was the gospel truth. And there we were, myself, first Kevin, a fully loaded truck, and the long, steep decline that was Snoqualmie Pass. Yep, I said to myself, I am definitely regretting my life choices right now. First Kevin starts down the pass. He was in top gear and the truck begins to accelerate rapidly. Since he's not using the engine brakes, the only way he can control the truck's speed without overusing the wheel brakes is to downshift. In order to do that, he must reduce speed. Shifting gears in a semi is a lot different than a regular car since a truck transmission will only go into gear if it and the engine are at the proper speed for the gear being selected. First Kevin slams on the brakes, throwing everything in the cab that isn't tied down forward. He tries to downshift, but his timing is off. For a few heart-stopping seconds, the truck is essentially dropping down the side of a mountain in a free fall before First Kevin manages to wrestle the truck into gear with another whiplash brake check and a grinding protest from the transmission. The engine revs up sharply as it fights against gravity and the excess speed for the gear. First Kevin, again, applies extremely heavy braking and grab the handhold above me and push myself back into the seat to cushion the jolt. At this point, I look over at the dash tachometer. It's reading over 1700 RPM. The normal operating range for this truck is between 1000 and 1500 RPM. Slowing down and reducing the engine speed is vital at this point. Even First Kevin knew that. He does, applying heavy braking again to slow the engine to just under 1500 RPM, and the speed appears to be relatively stable. Then, in a move that I can only describe as divine stupidity, First Kevin forces the transmission into the next lower gear. And when I say forced, I mean the truck was actively fighting him as if it were an animal raging in a trap. The gears of the transmission were grinding so hard that I thought they would be worn down before we reached the bottom of the hill. Eventually, however, First Kevin's stubborn determination won out and the truck went into gear. The truck screamed in protest. I glance at the tachometer and it's showing close to 2000 RPM, way outside the operating limits. Too much of this and the engine will literally tear itself apart, I knew. What does First Kevin do? Nothing. Goddamn it, I scream at him trying to make myself heard over the tortured engine. Slow down. Don't tell me how to drive. First Kevin snaps back. Apparently, he believes this is normal. I swear to God, First Kevin, if you wreck this truck, my sentence was cut off by yet another hard break and I'm wondering if I can stab this little bastard, take over the truck and claim self-defense. We went down that long, steep hill for what felt like hours. The screaming engine begged for mercy and First Kevin was completely oblivious. At any moment, I was expecting the engine to explode in a fiery death, taking us to our own a few moments later. But to its credit, it held on just long enough. We get to the bottom of the hill and the stress on both the engine and my nerves finally dissipates. At first, I think we dodged yet another bullet. The truck seems to be no worse for the wear and I managed not to kill First Kevin. At that moment, the dashboards lights up more than the annual Christmas tree at Rockefeller Plaza. Every warning light and alarm buzzer is going off as if we were in a movie helicopter that had just been hit by a rocket. I swear under my breath and begin looking on my phone for repair shops, truck stops, or anywhere nearby where we can get help. And then, as suddenly as it started, the dash goes quiet and the lights turn off. It wasn't a relief, more of the eerie quiet. That's not good. I say, knowing this wasn't some electronic glitch. I go back to my phone. It's the only thing I can do to keep myself from snapping First Kevin's neck. By some obscene stroke of luck, there's a dealership service shop at the next exit. It was just then that the dashboard lights and alarms make an encore appearance. I think something's wrong with the truck. First Kevin said as if I hadn't already worked out that much for myself. I give First Kevin my hardest glare. No shit, Sherlock, I reply, you just fell off a fucking mountain and blew the engine up. What do we do? He asked like a lost little boy. I take this moment to highlight his stupidity. I don't know, Super Trucker. You're the one who knows everything. Why don't you tell me? To say my nerves were frayed at this point would be a gross understatement. First Kevin keeps looking between the road and the dash. I can tell he's lost, confused, and clueless. Just then, the engine derates, essentially limiting its speed and horsepower in order to prevent further damage. Something is seriously wrong and First Kevin is completely useless. Next exit, I say, there's a dealership shop. First Kevin nods nervously. He rounds a bend and the exit comes in sight. Despite the truck's reduced speed, First Kevin is about to blow right past, something he can't very well afford to. First Kevin, exit now. I say. Here, he asks, unsure. Now. I scream, not even trying to be civil. First Kevin takes the exit, braking extremely hard again to get slow enough so as not to overturn the truck. I can see the sign for the dealership and guide First Kevin to it. We pull into the parking lot just moments before the truck dies. A charmed life, I think. I turn to First Kevin and say, "You, send dispatch a message. Tell them where we are and that we're checking into the shop. I'll go talk to the shop." He doesn't get a chance to protest as I jump out and head inside. The techs run a diagnostic and find a long list of fault codes. I have to coordinate between dispatch and the shop, because the company maintenance overseer knew nothing about trucks and First Kevin was completely useless, and find out that the truck will need to be in the shop overnight. They reluctantly agree to spring for a hotel room, within walking distance, and we go check in. First Kevin and I spent about 3 days in that hotel while the truck was being repaired. First Kevin, by virtue of his short-term memory problems, had completely forgotten about how it was all his doing. He gave a speech about how dangerous engine brakes were, but I reminded him that he was the one who was driving when the truck broke down. He tried to pass the blame, but it didn't matter. I had a more important task to focus on. If you ever needed or wanted to know how to make a rigid corporate structure to act in your favor, you might want to take notes. I had been gathering evidence against First Kevin for about 2 weeks before we broke down. In those 2 weeks, I had been able to gather enough problems against him that would make a district attorney green with envy. I divided my time between copying my notes to email and jotting down new items as they cropped up. It was tedious as the list never seemed to go down, but eventually, the email was ready. The only question that remained was who, exactly, would get the email. Normally, I would simply email my fleet manager like one would a supervisor. The problem was such a major issue would need nearly every department in the loop. The only problem was the company was strictly compartmentalized and often territorial. It wasn't uncommon to get messages from 3 or 4 department heads for one minor infraction. For example, when I had to request fuel in Indiana, I had to explain why to the route planning manager, fleet fuel controller, and the planning department in addition to my supervisory fleet manager. Not only was this incredibly ineffective and annoying, but it did also provide insight into how the system could be manipulated. For all its segmented nature, there was one department that had full authority over any other, that was the safety department. Since every trucking company must take safety seriously, the safety managers are taken very seriously. More often than not, a safety manager held more power than the CEO and was the one department that could rally the others to a cause. My plan was to send emails to the heads of every department that had jurisdiction over any of First Kevin's violations. Hours of service, planning, human resources, driver training, each department head would get the email. In addition, my fleet manager and the safety manager would get the exact same email. With any luck, one of the emails would trigger an investigation, the findings of which would start a chain reaction. At best, the safety manager would order every department to look into the matter. What I was careful not to do was to come off accusatory or demanding. My philosophy has been to assume ignorance before malevolence, that is, assume that the company simply wasn't aware of what's going on. And if I demanded that First Kevin was fired, I would risk coming across as bitter and spiteful, which would accomplish nothing. No, my emails would be professional, concise, detailed, and presented in a way that would say, "Hey, I found these problems and I wanted to bring them to your attention." The issues themselves would cause the panic. It was during this breakdown that I put the finishing touches on my plan. I dug through the company directory for the relevant emails, organized the documents and photos in the email, and arranged the list of violations by the relevant departments. If and when an investigation took place, all they would have to do was look where I pointed. I had nearly completed the email during the 3-day downtime while awaiting repairs. The day the truck was repaired, First Kevin and I went to the shop a few hours before the truck was released. When the techs told us it was ready, I was surprised First Kevin offered to sign it out and take the first shift of the day. It was uncharacteristically generous of him, which I found suspicious but did not say so. I decided to make a restroom stop before we left out. On the way out of the door, I walked by the service desk. The tech who worked on our truck was finishing up the ticket and waved me over. "Hey," he said somewhat bewildered, "aren't you with that short guy with the limp?" "Yeah, why do you ask?" I reply. "Well," he asked a weird question. I take a deep breath. I had a feeling what that question would be. Let me guess, he was asking about the engine brakes. The tech was taken aback. Yeah. He wanted to know how to disable them. I thought it was weird because why would anybody want to do that? I shake my head in disgust and glance to make sure First Kevin isn't in the room. Did you tell him? Hell no, the tech admitted. You'd be an idiot not to have them. I nod in agreement. By the way, I ask, what was it that was wrong with the truck? There were some cracks in the turbocharger housing, he explained. Aha.
And would keeping the engine at 2,000 RPM all the way down Snoqualmie cause that?
He looked at me knowingly. You better tell somebody about him if he can't drive any better than that. Oh, don't worry, I assure him. I will. And that ends Part 6, Breakdown. I will apologize in advance since Part 7 will be delayed as I will be unavailable during the weekend. But hopefully, I will be able to post it early next week. Until next time, this is Strong Bad Jr. reminding you to help control the Kevin population, have your Kevin spayed or neutered. Kevin in a Big Rig Part 7, Flashpoint. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Kevin in a Big Rig. As always, a big thank you to everyone who has followed this series this far, and so, what so many of you have been waiting for, let's get into Kevin in a Big Rig Part 7, Flashpoint. Backstory: these events take place over the span of a couple of days immediately following the events in Part 6, Breakdown. The 3-day breakdown had forced dispatch to call in another truck to rescue the load. I had figured as much since the load was considered high priority and, with an even more serious winter storm than what we faced in Nebraska bearing down on us, dispatch wanted to get the load to its destination as soon as possible. That left myself, First Kevin, a repaired truck, an empty trailer, and precious little time before we become stranded again by Old Man Winter. Almost as soon as we get the truck out of the shop from First Kevin's fiasco on Snoqualmie, dispatch sends us a load. It was to pick up in Lewiston, Idaho that same evening and deliver in Chicago. I was relieved as this put us heading away from the storm and, with luck, would keep us ahead of it. When I plotted the route, however, I was abruptly reminded that while the patron saint of truckers might protect those who call upon him, he also has a very morbid sense of humor. Lewiston is a mountain town along the Washington-Idaho border. From where we began, it would take the better part of a day traveling through remote areas with little chance of assistance if something were to happen. And because I hadn't suffered enough, the only way into Lewiston was south along US 95 and down another steep mountain grade. That was worse than Snoqualmie. How bad? Well, if Snoqualmie was a black diamond ski slope, Lewiston would be a triple black diamond, skull and crossbones level, and require a signed waiver of liability and clearance from a psychiatrist. And, just for kicks, First Kevin would be driving us there. Upon realizing this, I texted my mom and told her I loved her and that I was probably going to be dead in the next few hours. She thought I was drunk. For the first few hours, I stayed in the bunk trying to get what little sleep I could. First Kevin's horrendous driving did not help matters as I was constantly being woken up by my head being slammed into a cabinet by his excessive braking. I finally had to use my jacket as a makeshift cushion and keep my head from suffering a concussion. The truck drove on and on and on. Sleep, when it came, was fitful and fleeting. The jarring of the brakes and the whine of the over-revving engine foretold of an impending fate so terrifying as to make Edgar Allan Poe wet the bed and Stephen King by a night light. As the sky grew dark and the cold air began to bite, I decided I had slept as much as I could, pulled on my boots, and went up front. I looked out of the windshield and saw what I had been dreading, the warning sign for the steep drop into Lewiston. The highway on which we made the descent was also the town's main thoroughfare, fall off the cliff, roll into town. Any loss of control here and a lot of people besides us would more than likely be killed. I just hoped that, if I did die that night, it was quick, painless and First Kevin would join me so I could beat his ass for all eternity. First Kevin started down the grade, picking up speed too fast at first, but thanks to being empty, speed control was much easier. Still adamantly opposed to engine brakes, he maintained his speed through downshifting and heavy braking, much like he had attempted to do on Snoqualmie. When he finally managed to stabilize his speed, I lit a cigarette because I think all people doomed to die deserve one last smoke. But it wasn't my last smoke or my last day on Earth. Despite everything, First Kevin managed to get the truck down the mountain and into the town without it ending in a fiery crash. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding and take a long drag of my cigarette to calm my nerves. We were safe for the time being. First, Kevin manages to get us to the pickup, after getting lost, of course, and we change out while we are being loaded. I sit down in the driver's seat and program the route into my GPS. Getting back to the interstate was going to be tougher, I saw, as it was more remote wilderness, mountainous terrain, and little chance of help in an emergency. Adding to the difficulty was the fact that the storm we were desperately trying to outrun was catching up to us. Fortunately, it wasn't long before we get fully loaded and head to a local truck stop to top off the tanks since it was nearly 150 miles to the nearest truck stop. I refuel the truck while First Kevin goes inside the store. After several minutes, both fuel tanks filled and First Kevin was still inside doing God knows what. I pull the truck out of the fuel pumps and pull around to the parking area. I dash inside, grab some food, drinks, and smokes and come back to the truck to find First Kevin still isn't back yet. I begin to fantasize about what's keeping him. Stroke? Brain aneurysm? Abducted by aliens? They do tend to take the dumbest people, after all. But, alas, the hope was fleeting as I soon see him hobbling his way across the parking lot towards the truck, carrying a plastic bag and looking like a hobo about to ask for $1. First Kevin opens the passenger door and climbs inside. "Hey, mother F***, he yelled angrily, "why'd you move the truck?" I point at the "all trucks proceed to parking when fueling complete" signs hanging near the diesel pumps. "Because I can read, dickhead," I reply. "You know I have a bad leg. It hurts to walk that far. Do that again and I'll kick your ass," he threatens weakly. If you recall in part 2, I mentioned I was at least 1 foot taller and 100 pounds heavier than First Kevin, so his threat was more comical than menacing. "Oh really?" I reply, "You wouldn't lift a foot above my knees before I ripped that gimp leg off and beat you to death with it. Sit the fuck down and shut up." He mumbled something, but I didn't hear him as I released the brakes and pull out of the parking lot. The climb up the mountain was slow and painstaking. Snow was just starting to fall, but not yet heavy enough to be a serious concern. First Kevin, riding shotgun, was grumbling about his leg, the cold, and whatever else he felt like complaining about. I get to the top of the hill and press on, trying like hell to stay in front of the storm. First Kevin remained up front, though he had moved past griping and onto bragging about his future plans. Apparently, he had high aspirations for his trucking career. In a few months, he was going to become a lead driver, the title the company gave to driver trainers, and work his students like racial slur, his words, not mine. He also planned on becoming an independent contractor by leasing a truck through the company and making a lot more money. This would also allow him to run a little side business with his nephew who, according to First Kevin, was some major player in the prison chapter of the Aryan Brotherhood. He claimed his nephew could set him up running contraband out of Mexico. I paid very little attention to him as I'm more concerned about the winter storm that is almost on top of us. We start going down a hill, nothing serious but enough that I take my foot off the accelerator. I never trust cruise control in a semi. This causes the engine brakes to engage and, on cue, First Kevin takes it personally. "If you were my student," he said, trying to sound pretentious, "I'd fail you for that. What the fuck ever, man. At least I can go 5 minutes without getting lost." I reply, not missing a beat. "Don't use those things on my truck," he demands. "I'm not, dumbass." I shoot back. "This is the company truck, remember?" Just then, we start down another hill. This one is a bit longer but not overly steep. Again, I release the accelerator and the engine brakes re-engage. This was, apparently, the last straw for First Kevin. He reaches down, unbuckles his seat belt, and reaches over towards the steering wheel. The activation button for the engine brakes is on the right side of the steering wheel. I see his hand and slap it away. "Cut it out, dickhead," I tell him. He tries again, this time getting out of the seat and towering over me while reaching for the engine brake button. This is extremely dangerous as it's dark, we're on a narrow road and visibility is reduced because of the snow. I don't have the luxury of handling this diplomatically, so I grab him by the shirt with my right hand and literally throw him back into the passenger seat hard enough that his head bounces off the window. "If you ever pull a stunt like that again," I tell him, "I will break every bone in your body and leave you to the buzzards. You're not a lead driver and this is not your truck. Sit down, buckle up, and shut up." First Kevin obviously hadn't expected that reaction. Apparently, he was living in a fantasy universe where he was the trainer and I was the student. I suppose that knock to the head was enough to bring him back to reality, or as close as he could get, since he buckled his seatbelt and went about copying the company route to his precious notebook. A couple of hours pass in silence. The snow begins to fall heavier and accumulate on the ground and sticks to the road. The wind had begun to pick up and was rocking the truck side to side. It felt like an eternity since we had seen the last town, car, or even abandoned building. I had just started to begin thinking that maybe we hadn't survived the downgrade into Lewiston and this was my own personal hell when, far in the distance, I see the lights of a town. I checked the GPS and, sure enough, it's exactly where we are to rejoin Interstate 90. I was less excited about being on the interstate as I was about the prospect of finding shelter from the approaching storm. As we make our way through town, I keep my eyes peeled for a truck stop, Walmart, gas station, or anything that might offer a safe harbor for the night. But, to my increasing dismay, nothing. To make matters worse, the town appeared to be deserted. Even the 24-hour convenience stores were dark and empty. Suddenly, a few miles before reaching the interchange, a message comes across the computer. First Kevin takes the computer and reads it. "It's a weather alert," he says. "It says we have to shut down." "Of course," I say, still looking for somewhere to park and finding nothing. "Keep an eye out for a truck parking spot." We get closer to the interstate and find nothing. Even the gas stations with truck diesel lanes are clearly posted "no truck parking." My only alternative is to get back on the interstate and keep going until I find somewhere to shut down. I'll admit, this is the last thing I wanted to do, but my hands were tied. First Kevin, however, simply could not understand the situation. "Why are you getting on the interstate?" he asked. "Safety told us to shut down." "Yeah, but there's nowhere to shut down," I reply. "You have to stop," he insists. "Safety will write you up." "Where?" "On the side of the city highway." "You really think that's a good idea, jackass?" Looking back, I now see how ironic this question was. First Kevin gave up. Apparently being thrown bodily against a window one-handed takes away your nerve. "Well, if safety says anything, it's on you," he says. "I'm fine with that. And I'll tell them the same thing I'm telling you, you can't just stop in the middle of the fucking road." I take the on-ramp to Interstate 90 eastbound. I keep my speed at around 45 miles per hour, 72 kph, since, knowing we shouldn't be out here according to safety, I can at least use the fact that I was driving at a greatly reduced speed to say, yeah, I know, I should be shut down. But there's nowhere to shut down, so I have to keep going until I find a place to shut down. I plod along Interstate 90 through the Idaho Panhandle and find nowhere to park. The truck computer is going crazy, dinging every few minutes with messages wanting to know why we're traveling through a shutdown area. I can't send any reply, since I'm driving, and First Kevin is content to let me deal with it. I drive well into Montana before I see Salvation, a truck safety rest area. It's little more than a super wide shoulder on the side of the highway, but it's reasonably safe, and legal for us to use and, more importantly, it has enough room for us to get into. I guide the truck into a parking spot, shut off the headlights, and pick up the computer. I put myself off duty and go about responding to the messages. All but one are automated messages about the shutdown notice and the fact we are operating in one. The one non-automated message is from the night dispatcher. "You are operating inside of a shutdown area. Please shut down as soon as possible." The message asked, "What the hell did you think I was planning, dickhead?" I say to the screen. I reply, could not find a safe and legal parking spot when the alert was received. Was forced to continue on until a safe and legal parking area could be found. We are now shut down. Intentionally used the words safe and legal in my reply because, according to the company's own driver handbook, a truck that receives a weather shutdown notice must find a safe and legal place to shut down until the notice is lifted. That was their own policy verbatim. I was just following it, safe and legal. I decided to go back to the bunk and sleep. It was pretty obvious we were going nowhere until morning at least. The next morning, I'm awakened by the sound of the truck brakes releasing. I jump out of my bunk and check the computer. Safety had released the shutdown and implemented a 45 miles per hour limit for the area. First Kevin took it upon himself to take the first shift, so I crawled back into the bunk. A couple of hours later, I'm woken up by my phone ringing. I check it, unknown number, but the area code matches the company headquarters, so I answer. Hello? I answer. Hi, is this OP? Driver ID 9876, replied the voice. Yeah. This is Ken, not real name, from safety. This call is being recorded. We had a report that you willfully violated a mandatory shutdown area last night. Son of a bitch. First Kevin tried to turn me into safety. After the stunt he pulled with the engine brakes. Well, Ken, I reply, I suppose that depends on your definition of violated. Did you continue to drive after receiving a notice of the shutdown? Yes, I answer truthfully. Can you explain why? Well, Ken, if you refer to company driver handbook, such and such page, and such paragraph, you will see that it clearly states that, and I quote, upon receiving a shutdown alert, the driver must park the truck as soon as it is safe and legal to do so. End quote. Now, as I told the night dispatcher, I was not in an area that provided safe and legal parking and, therefore, was forced to continue on until safe and legal parking could be found. However, I was well aware of the dangerous road and weather conditions and elected to proceed at a speed no faster than 45 miles per hour, 72 kph, and shut down at the nearest safe and legal place available. For a few moments, Ken was quiet, but I heard the telltale tapping of a computer keyboard through the phone. I see. Well, looking at your route, I see that there was very little in the way of parking or facilities. No shit, Sherlock, I think to myself. That was my assessment of the situation as well, I confirm. Well, he continued, we received this report from an anonymous phone call and we had to follow it up. Anonymous, my ass. Am I being written up for this? Not at this time since, as you say, you were trying to get to a safe, legal parking area. We may look into this matter further at a later time. However, I would like to stress that you take care in the future. I manage to hide my rage when I respond, always do. Thanks, and hang up. For a few moments, I stared at the bunk ceiling in furious disbelief. Anonymous phone call? Yeah, that was bullshit since there was only one person who knew I had driven at that time who would have made a phone call. First Kevin, the rat-finked bastard, had tried to grass me up on the sly. Only he made one critical mistake, he underestimated me. I knew the safety policy, apparently better than the safety department itself, and I had probably saved my job and career by doing so. No doubt the little shit thought he won by his little ass-kissing exhibition, and he would no doubt try again when he realized it didn't work. But he wouldn't get that chance, oh no. Run game on me, little man, and I'll show you how it's played. I open my phone's email app and go to the saved email draft I had been preparing for so long. I attach the photos of the computer logs, double-check for missing issues, add in about the incident where he tried to grab the steering wheel while I was driving, and plug in the email addresses of the relevant department heads. I also make one addition to the end of the email, letting them know that, seeing as how the issue was habitual and ongoing, I would continue to provide daily updates via email on First Kevin's infractions and unsafe actions. Why email, you wonder? Well, in the eyes of the law, an email is considered an official document. By using email, I could use it as proof that I communicated the issue to the company. If the situation progressed to the point where legal action became necessary, the emails could be used as evidence that the company was made aware of the issue, but did nothing. That is negligence. I knew it and they should know it too, I thought. Well, they claim to put safety first, so let's see. I give the email a final once-over. It's ready, I think. I move my thumb up to the send icon and freeze. For a moment, a tiny voice of doubt pipes up. Is this the right thing to do? You could put yourself in the firing line with this. Even if you pull it off, it could ruin First Kevin's life. Is what he did so bad to really be worth that? For a moment, I almost consider not going through with it. Just ask for a new co-driver and... That thought was interrupted by my forehead banging off the cabinet, again. First Kevin and his piss-poor driving. Never mind, I tell myself decisively, fuck this asshole, and hit send. There was the slightest bit of regret when I saw the status of the email change from sending to sent. Oh well, too late now. No turning back. The missiles were in the air. Nothing left to do but wait. And that concludes Part 7, Flashpoint. As always, I want to thank each and every one of you for all your kind support and encouragement over the past couple of weeks. It means more to me than you will ever know. I hope to have Part 8 posted later this week. Until then, my friends, remember, friends don't let friends become Kevins. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos.